My name's Greg Knapp. This is the Greg Knapp Experience, your 20 to 30-minute thrill ride for your commute or your workout. A mom was arrested for letting her 14-year-old babysit her other kids. Wait, what? So-called fact checkers say that crack pipe giveaway story I brought you yesterday, well, that's false. They actually proved it was true. I'll get it to you in a minute. Illegal immigration at an all-time high, and deportations are down 70% from last year. And the Canada Freedom Rally now has 2 provinces dropping their COVID mandates. Oh man, it's all coming up. This edition of the Greg Knapp Experience. Let's go. All right, so let's start with this. This is just craziness. Reason has the story. I mean, government is out of control at all levels. Federal, state, local, and they have way too much control over our lives and way too much power. And we saw this huge power grab over COVID. Thankfully, the people are starting to push back. But here's another example of this. This was during COVID, okay? During COVID, this woman had her children's childcare shut down. May of 2020. Melissa Henderson is her name. Well, she's a single mom. She's got to go to work. She asked her 14-year-old daughter, Lindley, to babysit the 4 younger siblings, 14 years old. Now, Lindley's like, sure. Now, Lindley was also still doing remote learning, so she was working on the computer, and the 4-year-old kind of wandered across the street to play with his friend. Now, I saw a picture of their neighborhood, and it's one of these really quiet streets, a lot of space in between the houses, and the 4-year-old was playing with another kid across the street. 10 to 15 minutes before Lindley realized it, went over and fetched the kid, brought her back. No. The friend's mom had already called the police. What? What kind? If you're the mom of the friend, don't you just say, hey, Thaddeus, that's the name of the little kid. Hey, where's your mom? She's at work. Well, who's watching you? Oh, my sister. Oh, well, you know what? You really shouldn't wander off. Let's take you back over to your house. And then you say, hey, Lindley, your 4-year-old wandered away. You might want to be a little bit more careful. Oh, okay, sorry. No. Call the police. You know what I was doing when I was 4 years old? And I know it's different, and I know Grandpa Greg's coming out. But I remember vividly at 4 years old, riding my big wheel up and down the street with my 4-year-old neighbor. No parents, no adults, nobody else was around. And my mom said, be careful. She was horrible. She was an awful mom. Yep. Horrible. Now, look, I understand. Now's different. You worry about too many things. 4 years old, I agree, should be supervised. I get it. But the police? Well, yes, the police. Now, the single mom, Melissa Henderson, is facing criminal reckless conduct charges because her 14-year-old was babysitting. 14-year-olds babysit all the time. People hire 14-year-olds to watch babies. Well, they don't let them wander out. I don't think a baby can wander. So the arresting officer was Deputy Sheriff Mark Pilotti, and he wrote in his report that anything terrible could have happened to Thaddeus, including being kidnapped, run over, or bitten by a venomous snake. The mother said it was only 10 minutes, and the officer said, a few minutes is all the time a venomous snake needs. They don't live in the jungle. The case has now been dragging on for almost 2 years. Henderson's lawyer says charging a mom for a normal parenting decision was actually declared unconstitutional in Georgia. This is where it took place. The Georgia Supreme Court in 1997. In that case, an 11-year-old babysitting a younger sibling who died in a tragic accident, the court still ruled it was an arbitrary and subjective call to say the mom's decision was reckless because, 11-year-old watching their sibling, that's not a big deal. The guidelines in Georgia's own Child Protective Services says kids can babysit at age 13. I think that's way too late to say that, but my brother was babysitting me when he was 10. But see, Greg, your mom is crazy. Henderson had been investigated by the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services about a year earlier. Aha! Yeah, what happened was Thaddeus at age 3 had wandered out again. Do you know any people who have a child who wanders? I do. I know a few families who are very good families who've taken great care of their kids. They have several, and one of them is a wanderer, and they have to watch him very closely. They had to actually put those little things on the door so you can't open it and go outside because this kid just loves to go outside. Sometimes that happens. Well, guess what? The Department of Children and Family Services investigated this woman. She passed everything they needed her to do. She was totally cleared, but the police officer remembered that, so therefore there's a pattern here. 5 cop cars came to her house to arrest her. 5 cop cars because she let her 14-year-old babysit. She said, I have almost no words for how it made me feel, to truly feel in the bottom of my heart that if I'm anything, it's a good mother and everything you do is for your kids, to be stripped of that to the point where you are handcuffed in front of them. Yep. Put in the police cruiser, taken to jail, photographed, fingerprinted, given orange Crocs to wear, put in a cell. Her ex-husband bailed her out. What happened to no cash bail? Well, that's only for rioters. When I spoke with the district attorney, Jeff Langley, said the reporter, he said he felt the cops acted prudently as the boy had been outside once before on his own. And even a guilty verdict most likely won't result in prison time. Isn't that nice? And he thought that forbidding mom from letting her daughter babysit might be a good idea. We just want to make sure our children are safe in our small community. By the way, the officers informed the lawyer that the 14-year-old girl, Lindley, had some measure of learning disability, making her an unreliable babysitter. Oh, really? What's her learning disability? She's been diagnosed as ADHD. Yeah, so have half the kids in America. By the way, she has a GPA of 4.45. She's vice president of the 4-H club. She's broken school records in varsity track. She completed the Red Cross child care program and is certified in CPR. Sounds like somebody I'd have babysit my kids. How about you? Government has got to stop. You are not our mom and dad. And, you know, it's going to take us pushing back and voting out the people that believe that government is supposed to be the answer to every problem. Man, I loved it when Ronald Reagan said government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. Remember when Bill Clinton said, yeah, the era of big government is over? He didn't mean it, but it got a rousing round of applause when he said it. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like anybody means it anymore. But, you know, maybe one of the good things that can come out of COVID is that regular, everyday Americans are saying, that's it, I'm tired of it, get out of my life, government. Maybe. Washington Free Beacon brought you the story, and I brought it to you yesterday, about the HHS putting forward these safe drug kits, and they were going to include crack pipes because, you know, if you smoke them and you have sores in your mouth, you can get infected. And so we're going to help people, and it's going to be advancing racial equity because we're going to give priority to areas that serve African Americans and LGBTQAA, right? Remember that? Well, they came out, no, that can't be true. No, that's not right. And Jen Psaki was trying to say it's not true. And well, Snopes did a little fact check on it. Matt Palumbo reporting. And the funny thing is, as they said it was mostly false, they actually proved it was true. The fact check, the so-called fact check, said that this Washington Free Beacon misrepresented the story. Here we go, from Snopes. The crack pipe distribution was just one of around 20 components of the grant program, and far from its most prominent or important one. Despite being the primary focus of outraged news reports, the purpose of the program was to reduce harm and the risk of infection among drug users, not to advance racial equity, although that was a secondary consideration. Okay, so you just proved it was true. You said the crack pipe distribution was one of the components, right? So that means it was happening. That's true. And that the racial equity was a secondary consideration. I don't care if it was primary, secondary, tertiary. It was one of the things that was cited. So you just proved that the report was true, Snopes, while you're saying it wasn't. No, they go on. Secondly, the provision of safer smoking supplies did not have its purpose of advancing the cause of racial equity. Its purpose was, quite logically, to reduce harm and infection. However, the grant description did state that priority would be given to applicants who serve communities that are historically underserved. In other words, the grant's terms encouraged recipients to advance racial equity while working for harm reduction, not the other way around. It's a crucial distinction, which many outlets got wrong. Really? Is that a crucial distinction? It's really not a distinction at all. It was used to advance racial equity. You got to be kidding me. Nope. No. And so Facebook was partnering with Lead Stories to fact check and take these things down and deplatform people. And the HHS Secretary Becerra had to come out and tell everybody, no, the crack pipes won't be distributed using federal funds. No. In a press release, Becerra and the Office of National Drug Control Policy Director Dr. Rahul Gupta, not Sanjay Gupta from CNN, different Gupta, said the administration was focused on using our resources smartly to reduce harm and save lives. Accordingly, no federal funding will be used directly or through subsequent reimbursement of grantees to put pipes and save smoking kits. The way they say that, it makes me think that maybe there's still a way it's going to happen. Because the funding won't be directly or through subsequent reimbursement of grantees. Why didn't they just say we're not doing it? I think they're leaving themselves a loophole in there somewhere that I just don't know about. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said on Wednesday the reporting was inaccurate and that crack pipes were never part of the smoking kits. But the Washington Free Beacon said they had spoken with an HHS spokesperson who confirmed that the pipes and other paraphernalia would be part of the kits. I'm trusting the Washington Free Beacon over Jen Psaki. How about you? She's lied to me too many times. Gupta and Becerra did note they would continue to use harm reduction strategies like providing clean syringes. We're back to the clean needles for drug users, not the crack pipes. Come on. What's funny is if Snopes did their investigation and they still reported that crack pipes were part of it, then how can Jen Psaki also be right? I mean, because, Snopes, nobody can question Snopes. The grant document references Biden's executive order 13985, titled Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. Snopes, kind of seems like that was part of it. HHS initially cast doubt on the Beacon's reporting, calling it blatant misinformation while defending the harm reduction strategies. However, it did not explicitly deny that there were plans to fund crack pipe distribution. Sounds like they're still not denying it, only Jen Psaki did. But they're not going to do it anymore. Just back to the free needles that are scattered all over the roadways in places that give them away so that your kids can play with it. I mean, but I'm sure it's really smart. It's great to give people ways to do something that's illegal while telling them not to do it. Greg, it protects them. Does it really? Because I don't think it does. Because I think you'll find those free needles, they're still sharing them. ICE deportations are down 70% last year under Biden. Down 70%. Now remember, the country faces an unprecedented surge of illegal aliens on the southern border, and deportations are down 70%. That's from the Biden administration's report released a month after the press got on them for not releasing it on time. 70% down. Oh, and we got to hear this. We've been talking a lot about the idea of the masking and the masking mandates. And we've got more and more governors saying stop the mandates, including Democrat governors. Well, when the Republican governors were saying stop it, the press went nuts. Now that Democrats are doing it, it's a different story. And if you think I'm making it up, great piece put together here by the Washington Free Beacon. They've been all over it lately. Put together a little video here. The beginning, you're going to hear them go nuts when Governor Glenn Youngkin, Republican, lifted Virginia's mask mandate for public schools. And then you're going to hear a shift as more Democrats are saying it's time to end the mask mandate. So listen to this.
In Virginia, the new Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, the man on your screen, is defending his executive order, which allows parents to decide if they want their kids to wear masks in school.
Glenn Youngkin campaigned as if he were an ordinary suburban, fleece-wearing dad with moderate and expensive.
Youngkin did exactly what a Republican does when they get into power. Let's look at what's going on. Let's move the state back 50 years.
Public training, Glenn Youngkin.
Politics makes a lot of Republican governors stupid.
It's MAGA red.
New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, Oregon, and California all moved to relax their mask mandate.
These are all states led by Democrats and ones who already hit COVID zones, and they seem to be decisions driven by science, not politics.
The reaction so far has been broadly, if not overwhelmingly, positive.
The record rate is headed in the right direction than we hoped we would be.
More signs the country is pushing to get back to normal.
The responsibility should shift from a government mandate imposed from the state or the local district of the school. Rather, it should shift to an individual responsibility by the family.
This follows what the governor in Pennsylvania
Spain has done. The governor in Colorado has started to dismantle a lot of those rules. New York, Connecticut, they're also looking at similar rules.
I mean, this makes your head spin, right? I mean, it's so political.
Oh, isn't that nice? I mean, there's no double standard. Not at all. Oh, and speaking of the change, I told you yesterday came out and we were talking about the CNN medical expert, Leanna Wen. And she's like, well, we used to have this mask mandate, but we don't need it anymore because the science has changed. And I said, no, the science hasn't changed. What's changed is the Democrats realize the midterms are coming. It's not popular to have the kids masked up at school anymore. Everybody wants to get back to normal. And so they've got to do it quickly. And the only way they can do it quickly without admitting that they were wrong, and that for the last year, 2 years now, they've been having your kids sit in a mask that they didn't need to be wearing because the science has always shown that those cloth masks don't work. We found more information as we went on, but for at least a year, we've known that hasn't been working. And they finally saying that there's new science? No. So Kyle Smith has a great piece in National Review where he just goes through it and says, where did the science change? See, these people won't admit that they're wrong. And we cannot forget how wrong they were. The experts were wrong time and time again. We've gone through it. How Fauci was wrong about the mask, then he was wrong about the mask again. Then he lied to you about what herd immunity would be. He kept changing the percentage we would need to do it. And when caught on it, he told the New York Times, well, I could only say what I thought the people could really accept at the time. No, you tell the truth. You tell the truth. And yet they couldn't do it. They've been lying about masking of our children. Just on and on and on. They're just not telling us the truth. And so we need to call them on it. And they need to admit that they were wrong. Now, look, there's a big difference between truly we thought this, and then as we get more and more evidence, things change. I get that. But they lied to us. Remember, Fauci said, there's really no reason to wear the mask if you're not sick. And then he came out and said, well, everybody should be wearing the mask. The reason I said that was because I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a run on masks and we had enough masks for the first responders and the doctors and the nurses. So you lied to us. Well, yeah, but it was a noble lie. And then I told you about the lie over the herd immunity. And so there's a difference between truly the science changes and lying. The science has not changed on these masks over the last year. It's just that people are finally saying, I'm tired of it. So he goes into it here, Kyle Smith. He says, as of January 14, she was saying we needed to tighten our mask policy. That's Dr. Leanna Wen. January 14, there's been no new science that has come out since January 14 on masking. She was saying, and just going back to December 20, and there's nothing new from December 20, just 7 weeks ago, she was telling people they needed to wear triple ply masks, even when outdoors, if they were in a crowd. She said kids needed at least triple layer masks when indoors, which of course means schools. No matter what the emotional, social, developmental cost was, that's what she said we needed. That was just 7 weeks ago. And she said it was because of high levels of COVID-19 circulating. Actually, we have higher numbers now. The science has changed. What new scientific data came in since December 20? There was none. December 20 was the day where she admitted cloth masks are a little more than facial decorations. Yet she was still saying we needed to wear triple layers, and kids did. So they're not going to admit they were wrong. They're going to try to gaslight you and act like they've always been right, and you're the one that's wrong. You're the one that's been doing these crazy conspiracy theories, although everything we've been saying is turning out to be true. New York is doing a California. I told you about Governor Gavin Newsom saying it's time to end the mask mandates, except for schools. And now New York to drop the indoor mask mandate, except for kids at school. Now, here's the problem. Kids are the least at risk. They are the least in need of wearing the masks. We have proof that the cloth masks don't work. That's what kids are wearing. The N95s don't fit kids correctly, and even then, kids won't wear them correctly. The studies show, science shows, and yet these are the ones they're making still wear the mask. Stop it. Greg, you're getting fired up on the mask. I know, because it's these government weenies that think they have power and they want to use it, and they claim they're helping, and they're not. They're hurting. They are not doing a cost-benefit analysis. They have not looked at the real science. It is 100% political. It's for the teachers' unions, and they just they just won't admit they're wrong. The Canadian Freedom Rally seems to be having an impact. Alberta and Saskatchewan are ending their vaccine passports. Heather Hamilton reporting. The Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, the time has come to lift COVID-19 health restrictions in Alberta and begin getting back to normal. Thank you. How about the Saskatchewan Premier, Scott Moe? He said that it's time for us to heal the divisions in our communities over vaccination. Those divisions are in our families. Yes, they're in our communities, but they are across our province and across this nation. Now is the time to begin learning to live with COVID. These restrictions have led to terrible division. And Alberta's premier echoed that, saying, we will likely also see times when there's additional pressure on the hospitals, but restrictions, mandates, and those kinds of interventions will not and must not become a permanent feature of our lives. And they both called on the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau to end the vaccine mandate for truckers. We'll see if he listens to reason. My guess, he won't. He can't admit that he was wrong. Hawaii is now deciding to not require tourists to be boosted to visit. So that's it's all changing because like I said, the midterms are coming and they don't want to lose everything. They're going to lose big. The Democrats are going to lose really, really big, but they're trying to stem the bleeding. Finally, you got Dr. Harvey Risch in the Wall Street Journal. He's a professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. Well, I mean, no credentials there, right? Yeah. Professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health, and he says this: time to end the COVID emergency. Absolutely, past time. And I'm just going to quote some of this at length because this is some great stuff. He says the time has come for states and the federal government to end their COVID declarations of emergency and the accompanying closures, restrictions, propaganda, distancing requirements, forced masking, and vaccine mandates. COVID may circulate at some level forever, but Americans can now protect those vulnerable to it with standard medical procedures. They can treat it as they would the flu. The flu. So emergency measures need continuous justification, and there isn't any anymore. Yep. So look, you got Omicron as the dominant. Delta's almost totally gone. Omicron is mild enough for most people, even many in the high-risk categories, to adequately cope with the infection. It's more like the flu now. Those vulnerable to COVID are already vaccinated and protected. Treatments have vastly improved on once you get COVID now. We've learned much about inexpensive supplements like vitamin D. I mean, I'm on the whole thing. I'm sure you are too. I'm doing vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. When I had COVID, it was recommended there were all kinds of over-the-counter things that I did, including Pepsid and some Singulair, and there's a bunch of stuff you can do now. Plus, now we've got the antiviral pills, although not enough because the Biden administration didn't do its job. We used to have the monoclonal treatments. Once again, the Biden people said you can't, even though one of them is still beneficial against Omicron. But I'm getting sidetracked. Says, for young people, the risk of severe disease, already low before Omicron, is now minuscule. Yeah. And there's evidence that Americans have built up additional immunity through the recent Omicron wave. Yeah, you look at 250 people vaccinated, tens of millions have recovered from COVID, have natural immunity. A lot of the people that are vaccinated have now gotten COVID and they're super immunized. And we're still acting like this thing is an emergency. No, it's not. It's time to live with it. Back to Dr. Risch. There is no longer any justification for the federal government and states to maintain their declarations of emergency. The lockdowns, personnel firings, shortages, school disruptions are doing at least as much damage to the population's health and welfare as the virus. Yeah, I think it's doing more. The state of emergency is unjustified now. It can't be justified by fears of a hypothetical resurgence of a more severe infection at some unknown point in the future. If the government can grant itself such power, then the limits imposed by the federal and state constitutions are effectively meaningless. Just so. Exactly right. And it's why people are rising up and saying no. It's why students are walking out of school over the mask mandates. It's why you have the truckers doing the freedom convoys. It's why people are saying no on airplanes. Now, I don't want violence. I don't want people acting like crazy. But you know what? People are tired of it, and our government needs to listen because it's supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people, not of, by, and for the politicians. And maybe it's going to take the midterm to make people finally figure that out. My name is Greg Knapp. This is the Greg Knapp Experience.